Document, Part 6, 1400 words. The doors sealed with a deep, resonant thud, leaving the group of humans standing in silence inside the alien structure. The air was cool and still, but it carried a faint hum, as if the walls themselves were alive. Around them, the holographic displays flickered and shifted, casting strange patterns of light that danced across the floor. No one moved or spoke. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone like an invisible force. Jack Thompson glanced at the others, his eyes scanning their faces for any sign of reassurance. Most looked just as uneasy as he felt, though a few like Laura Bennett seemed oddly calm, almost focused. Emma Lewis stood beside him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression unreadable. She was trying to stay strong, but Jack could see the fear lurking beneath her composed exterior. "Okay," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. His voice echoed slightly in the vast chamber, startling some of the others. "What now?" Laura stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the central platform. "We wait. It'll tell us what to do." Emma frowned. "You think it's watching us?" "No, it is," Laura replied without hesitation. "This whole place is designed to observe us. Every move we make, every decision we take, it's all part of the test." As if on cue, the symbols on the holographic displays began to rearrange, themselves forming new patterns that pulsed rhythmically. A low, melodic tone filled the room, growing louder until it drowned out the ambient hum. Then, the entity's voice spoke again, calm and measured. "Your trial will measure not only your strength but also your unity, which work together or fail alone." The words hung in the air, sending ripples of unease through the group. Unity? What did that mean? Were they expected to collaborate, even though none of them knew each other? And how would they be tested? Before anyone could ask questions, the floor beneath their feet began to shift. Panels slid apart, revealing glowing lines that formed intricate pathways leading away from the central platform. Each path branched, off into different directions, disappearing into tunnels that spiraled downward into darkness. "You've got to be kidding me," muttered a man near the back of the group. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and a military. Bearing his name tag, read Captain Ryan Mitchell. Ryan turned to address the group, his tone firm but controlled. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there, but splitting up doesn't seem like a good idea. If this thing values unity, then staying together might be our best shot." Laura nodded in agreement. "He's right. Dividing ourselves could play right into its hands. Let's stick together at least until we understand what we're dealing with." Not everyone looked convinced. A young woman with glasses and a clipboard tucked under her arm raised her hand hesitantly. What? If the paths are meant to separate us, what if choosing one route over another is part of the test?" Her question sparked murmurs of uncertainty among the group. Was this a puzzle designed to divide them? Or was cooperation truly the key to passing the trial? "We won't know unless we try," Jack said firmly, stepping toward one of the glowing paths. "Let's pick a direction and move forward. If something goes wrong, we can always regroup." Reluctantly, the others followed, forming a loose cluster as they descended into the first tunnel. The walls shimmered faintly, pulsating with soft bioluminescent light. The air grew cooler as they went deeper, and the hum from earlier faded, replaced by an eerie silence. After several minutes of walking, the tunnel opened into a large chamber. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline object roughly the size of a basketball. Its surface refracted light in dazzling colors, creating a kaleidoscope effect that made it difficult to look at directly. "What is that?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Laura admitted, approaching cautiously. "But I'd bet it's important." As she reached out to touch the crystal, the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber began to close in, moving inward at an alarming rate. Panic rippled through the group as people scrambled to find a way out. "Don't panic," Ryan shouted, raising his hands to calm the crowd. "Look for a mechanism. There has to be a way to stop this." Jack's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that resembled a control panel. Then he noticed something etched into the base of the pedestal, a series of symbols identical to those projected earlier. "Laura," he called out. "These symbols, they match the ones you decoded before." Laura rushed over, pulling out her tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen as she worked to translate the markings. "It's a sequence," she said. After a moment, "If we activate the crystal in the correct order, it might halt the collapse." "How much time do we have?" Emma asked, glancing nervously at the encroaching walls. "Not long," Ryan replied grimly. The walls were now less than 10 feet away. Closing fast without wasting another second, Laura instructed the group to follow her lead. "Everyone, stand ready. When I say so, touch the crystal in this exact order." She quickly explained the sequence, making sure everyone understood their role. As the walls closed in further, squeezing the group into a tight circle, Laura gave the signal. One by one, they touched the crystal, their actions synchronized despite the chaos. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a brilliant flash of light, the crystal emitted a surge of energy that halted the wall's advance. Slowly, they began to retract, returning to their original positions. The group let out a collective sigh of relief, collapsing onto the floor in exhaustion. "That was too close," Emma muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. "It's not over yet," Laura reminded them, her tone serious. "This is just the beginning." True to her words, the pedestal sank into the floor, revealing a hidden passageway below. A staircase spiraled downward, leading deeper into the structure. Without hesitation, the group pressed onward, knowing they had no choice but to keep moving. The next chamber was unlike anything they had encountered so far. It was vast and open, with towering columns supporting a domed ceiling that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. Suspended in midair were dozens of floating platforms, each connected by narrow bridges that swayed precariously in the breeze. At the far end of the room stood another pedestal, similar to the one they had encountered earlier. "This looks dangerous," Ryan commented dryly, eyeing the unstable bridges. "It's probably meant to be," Jack replied, squinting at the distance. "Looks like teamwork is about to get real." Laura studied the layout carefully. "If we work together, we can cross safely. But we'll need to coordinate our movements. If one person slips, it could destabilize the entire bridge." Nodded, stepping forward. "I'll go first. I'm Lighterell. Test the stability." "No," Ryan interjected firmly. "You're not going alone. We'll send someone steady and cautious. Maybe you." He pointed to a middle-aged man wearing a lab coat. "Dr. Patel, right? You seem like the careful type." Dr. Patel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. "I'm not sure I'm the best choice." "You're perfect," Laura encouraged. "Just take it slow, and we'll guide you from behind." With some reluctance, Dr. Patel stepped onto the first platform. The bridge wobbled slightly, but held firm. Taking a deep breath, he began inching his way across, gripping the edges tightly. Behind him, the rest of the group followed in single file, communicating quietly to maintain balance. Halfway across, disaster struck. One of the platforms shifted unexpectedly, causing the bridge to tilt sharply. Several people lost their footing, clinging desperately to the ropes. Screams echoed through the chamber as the group struggled to regain stability. "Hold on," Ryan barked, anchoring himself to the bridge with one hand while reaching out to help others. "Don't let go." Working together, they managed to stabilize the bridge and continue crossing. By the time they reached the far side, everyone was trembling with adrenaline and relief. "Well, that was fun," Jack quipped sarcastically, earning a weak laugh from Emma. On the pedestal ahead, another crystal awaited, this one larger and more intricate than the last. Laura examined it closely, noting the familiar symbols etched into its surface. "This must trigger the next phase," she said. "But activating it might involve more than just touching it." Before she could elaborate, the ground beneath the pedestal began to rise, lifting it higher into the air. At the same time, the chamber's temperature dropped sharply, and frost began forming on the walls. From the shadows emerged humanoid figures, translucent and ghostly, their forms flickering like static on a screen. They're here to stop us, Ryan growled, instinctively stepping into a defensive stance. No weapons, Laura warned urgently. They're not physical, they're projections. Fighting them won't work. Instead, she focused on the crystal, deciphering the symbols faster than ever. Everyone, focus on the pedestal. Whatever these things are, they're distractions. Ghostly figures advanced, their movements jerky and unnatural. They circled the group, emitting low, distorted whispers that sent shivers down everyone's spines. Despite Laura's warning, several people tried to fend them off, only to discover their efforts were futile. Stay calm, Laura urged her, voice cutting through the confusion. Trust me, we can do this. Following her instructions, the group concentrated on the crystal, activating it in unison. The final symbol lit you. Document. Part 1, 1,400 words. The sky over New York City was clear that morning. A soft blue stretching endlessly above the towering skyscrapers. People went about their usual routines, commuters rushing to work, tourists snapping photos of the Statue of Liberty, and street vendors setting up their carts for the day. It was an ordinary morning, or so it seemed. But at exactly 8:47 a.m., everything changed. A low rumble shook the ground first, faint but noticeable. At first, people thought it might be construction, or perhaps a distant thunderstorm rolling in. But then the rumbling grew louder, more intense, until windows began to rattle and car alarms blared. Pedestrians stopped in their tracks, looking up at the sky with puzzled expressions. Something wasn't right, and then they saw it at first. It looked like a shadow, a dark smudge against the otherwise perfect blue. But as seconds passed, the shadow grew larger, darker, and more defined. Soon, it became clear that this wasn't just one object. There were hundreds of them. Massive shapes descended from the heavens, blotting out the sun and casting the city into an eerie twilight. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very atmosphere itself had shifted under the weight of what was happening. People screamed. Some froze in place, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Others ran instinctively seeking shelter even though they didn't know where to go or what to do. Cars screeched to a halt in the streets, creating chaos as drivers abandoned their vehicles and fled on foot. The once bustling city turned into a scene of panic and confusion. High above the chaos, the alien ships hung silently in the air, perfectly still, despite their immense size. Each vessel was shaped like a sleek metallic teardrop, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. They varied in size, some small enough to fit within the length of a football field, while others were so massive they dwarfed the tallest buildings in Manhattan. There were 847 of them in total, arranged in a precise formation that seemed almost artistic in its symmetry. Jack Thompson sat in front of his computer screen at Nord headquarters, staring at the live satellite feed showing the alien fleet hovering over New York. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to type or where to begin. He'd been monitoring unusual activity in Earth's orbit for weeks now, but nothing could have prepared him for this. What the hell is going on? He muttered under his breath, leaning closer to the monitor. Beside him, Lieutenant Emma Lewis adjusted her headset, trying to make sense of the flood of incoming reports from around the world. Every channel was lighting up with panicked voices: military, personnel, civilians, pilots, all describing the same thing: an alien armada appearing out of nowhere. It's not just New York, Emma said, her voice tight with tension. We're getting reports from London, Tokyo, Sydney, everywhere. And these things are positioned over every major city on the planet. Jack nodded slowly, his mind racing. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was barely 9 o'clock in the morning. How could the day have taken such a catastrophic turn so quickly? He reached for his coffee mug, only to realize it was empty. The caffeine would have helped, but right now, nothing could calm the storm brewing inside him, before either of them could say anything else. The room was filled with the sound of static. A transmission was coming through, one that wasn't human. The voice was deep and guttural, distorted by some kind of mechanical filter. It spoke in broken English, each word dripping with arrogance and disdain. Humans, the voice boomed. You are weak. Your time has ended. Emma flinched at the sound, her hand instinctively moving to cover her earpiece. Jack leaned forward, straining to hear every word. The message continued, echoing across every communication channel on Earth. We are the Zetharians. You will surrender your planet to us. Resistance is futile. If you comply, we may spare some of you as slaves. If you resist... The voice paused for dramatic effect, letting the threat hang in the air. We will annihilate you completely. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving behind a deafening silence. For a moment, no one spoke. Everyone in the control room simply stared at their screens, processing what they had just heard. Jack finally broke the silence. Well, that's comforting, he said dryly, sinking back into his chair. Any idea how we're supposed to fight off 847 warships? Emma shook her head, her face pale. I don't think we can, not with what we've got. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. He knew she was right. Humanity's military might was impressive. But it was designed to fight other humans, not an advanced alien species capable of traveling between stars. Even the most powerful weapons on Earth would be useless against ships that could withstand re-entry into the atmosphere without so much as a scratch. But giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. As the minutes ticked by, the situation grew worse. News outlets around the world broadcast images of the alien fleet, sparking widespread panic. Social media exploded with videos of people fleeing their homes, crying, praying, or simply staring in disbelief at the sky. Governments scrambled to respond, issuing statements urging calm while secretly debating whether resistance was even worth attempting. In Washington, D.C., President Matthew Collins held an emergency meeting with his advisors. The Oval Office was packed with grim-faced officials, all of whom looked to him for guidance. Collins stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he listened to updates from military leaders and intelligence agencies. Mr. President General, Carter Hayes began, his tone grave. Based on our initial analysis, these ships are far beyond anything we've ever encountered. Their technology is, well, frankly, it's beyond our understanding. We're talking about energy shields, propulsion systems we can't replicate, and weaponry that could level entire cities in seconds. Collins nodded, absorbing the information. So you're saying we don't stand a chance? Hayes hesitated before answering. Not with conventional means, sir. But there may be another option. All eyes turned to Dr. Laura Bennett, who sat quietly at the end of the table. She was a physicist, one of the brightest minds in her field, and had spent years working on classified projects for the Department of Defense. Her presence at the meeting was unusual, but given the circumstances, her expertise was invaluable. Project Sentinel, she said simply, meeting Collins' gaze. It's experimental, untested, and highly risky. But it's the only thing we have that might give us a fighting chance. Collins frowned, explained. Laura took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. Project Sentinel is a planetary defense system designed to counteract advanced threats. It uses a network of satellites equipped with directed energy weapons to create a global shield. In theory, it should be able to neutralize incoming attacks and disable enemy vessels. However, it requires an enormous amount of power, more than we've ever generated before, and there's no guarantee it will work. The room fell silent as everyone processed her words. It was a long shot, but it was better than nothing. How long would it take to activate? Collins asked after a moment. At least an hour, Laura replied. Maybe longer. We'll need every available resource diverted to the project immediately. Collins nodded, making his decision. Do it. Whatever it takes, get it done. Back at Nora, Jack and Emma received the order to assist with Project Sentinel. They exchanged worried glances, but wasted no time getting to work. The next hour was a blur of frantic activity as they coordinated with teams around the world to bring the system online. Jack typed furiously, rerouting power grids and recalibrating satellites, while Emma monitored communications, relaying updates to the team. Outside, the alien fleet remained ominously still, as if waiting for something. No further transmissions came, but the threat lingered in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Civilians huddled in shelters, soldiers manned their posts, and governments issued desperate pleas for unity and courage. 40-5 minutes passed. Then 50. The tension in the control room was palpable, a thick fog of fear and uncertainty hanging over everyone. Jack glanced at the clock, his heart pounding. They were running out of time, and then, at exactly 9:59 a.m., the aliens moved. The massive ships began descending lower, their engines roaring to life with a deafening hum. Buildings trembled, and the ground shook violently as the fleet prepared to strike. Panic erupted in cities worldwide, and cries for help flooded the airwaves. Jack clenched his fists, his knuckles white as he watched the countdown timer on his screen. 1 minute. Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "That's all we've got." Jack didn't respond. He couldn't. All he could do was focus on the task at hand, praying that Project Sentinel would work. Somewhere deep down, he knew this might be humanity's last stand, and then, with 30 seconds left, the system came online. A faint hum filled the air, growing louder and more intense. With each passing second, energy coursed through the satellites, converging on a single point high above the Earth's surface. Jack pressed the final button, initiating the activation sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien ships continued their descent undeterred. Jack's stomach sank. Had they failed? But then, just as the first wave of alien projectiles launched toward the planet, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the ATM. Document Part 2. 1,400 words. The light faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. The alien fleet that had loomed over Earth just moments ago was gone, reduced to nothing more than a faint haze of ash drifting through the atmosphere. People stood frozen, staring at the empty sky, unsure if what they had witnessed was real or some kind of collective hallucination. The world held its breath, waiting for anything to happen next. Inside NORAD headquarters, Jack Thompson slumped back in his chair, his hands trembling as he stared at the blank monitors. Beside him, Lieutenant Emma Lewis sat equally stunned, her headset dangling loosely from one ear. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The enormity of what they had just done, or rather, what Project Sentinel had done, was sinking. And slowly, like a weight pressing down on their chests, "Did we win?" Emma finally whispered, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she feared saying the words out loud might jinx whatever fragile peace they now found themselves in. Jack shook his head. "Still processing everything. I don't know," he admitted. "But I think we just bought ourselves some time." Emma nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was barely past 10 in the morning. Less than 2 hours had passed since the aliens first appeared, yet it felt like days. The adrenaline coursing through. Her veins began to ebb, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. What came next? Was this really over? Or was it just the beginning? Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Matthew Collins paced anxiously in the Situation Room. Around him, advisors and military leaders exchanged hushed whispers, debating the implications of what had just happened. Screens displayed live footage from cities around the world, showing stunned citizens emerging from shelters and gazing up at the suddenly clear skies. For the first time in decades, humanity seemed united not by hope, but by sheer survival instinct. General Carter Hayes entered the room, his face grim despite the apparent victory. He approached Collins, who stopped pacing long enough to meet his gaze. "Sir," Hayes began, choosing his words carefully, "we've confirmed that the alien fleet has been neutralized. Whatever Project Sentinel did, it worked. But there's no way to tell how permanent this solution is or whether more ships are on the way." Collins let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his graying hair. "So we're not out of the woods yet." "Oh, sir," Hayes replied firmly. "In fact, we may have just made things worse. If these Cytherians were testing us, then we've shown them exactly how far we're willing to go to defend ourselves. That could provoke retaliation." The president frowned, considering the general's words. It was a sobering thought, one that cast a shadow over the fleeting sense of triumph they'd all felt just moments ago. "What about Dr. Bennett?" Collins asked after a pause. "Does she have any insights into what happened?" He's nodded. She's analyzing the data now. Early reports suggest that Project Sentinel overloaded the alien systems with directed energy. Essentially, we fried their technology before they could fire a single shot. But at what cost?
Alan's?
Pressed, his tone sharper than intended. We diverted power grids, shut down hospitals, and left millions without electricity. Not to mention the destruction caused by the initial attack. This isn't a win, it's damage control. Hayes didn't argue. There's truth in the president's words. While Project Sentinel had saved countless lives, the collateral damage was staggering. Cities across the globe lay in ruins, their skylines marred by craters and toppled buildings. Emergency services were overwhelmed, and communication networks were spotty at best. Humanity had survived, yes, but surviving wasn't the same as thriving. Back at NORAD, Jack and Emma continued monitoring the situation. The initial euphoria of their success had worn off quickly, replaced by the harsh reality of the aftermath. Reports poured in from every corner of the planet, detailing the devastation wrought by the brief skirmish. Fires raged unchecked in urban centers, water supplies were contaminated, and thousands of people were trapped under collapsed structures. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Laura Bennett joined them shortly afterward, her expression unreadable. She carried a tablet under one arm, its screen displaying streams of data collected during the activation of Project Sentinel. Without a word, she pulled up a chair and began reviewing the information alongside Jack and Emma. So, Jack ventured cautiously, glancing at Laura. What happens now? Laura looked up, her eyes weary, but determined. Now we figure out why this happened and whether it's going to happen again. Emma frowned. You think there's more of them? I know there is, Laura said bluntly. These ships weren't explorers or scouts. They were an invasion force, fully armed and ready to conquer. And based on the size of the fleet, I'd say they expected resistance, but not from us. Something about our technology surprised them. Jack raised an eyebrow. Our technology? We didn't even know Project Sentinel would work until it did. Exactly, Laura replied. Which means either they underestimated us, or someone else led them to believe Earth wouldn't fight back. The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone or something had tipped off the Zetherians about Earth's vulnerability. Whether it was misinformation, sabotage, or something else entirely, the question remained, who was pulling the strings? As the day wore on, the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Intelligence agencies intercepted fragments of alien communications, distorted echoes of commands, issued moments before the fleet's destruction. Analysts worked tirelessly to decode the messages, piecing together snippets of information that hinted at a larger plan. One phrase kept appearing repeatedly, Phase 2. What does that mean? Emma asked when the term was brought up. During a conference call with other teams, it means they're not done, Laura answered grimly. This was only the first wave. Phase 2 could be anything, a bigger fleet, ground troops, biological weapons. We don't know yet, but we need to prepare for the worst. Preparation wasn't easy, especially given the state of the planet. Governments struggled to maintain order as panic spread among the population. Social media buzzed with conspiracy, theories, false rumors, and doomsday predictions. Some claimed the aliens were gods punishing humanity for its sins. Others insisted the attack was staged by world leaders as a pretext for seizing power. Amid the chaos, facts became muddled, and trust eroded to combat misinformation. President Collins addressed the nation in a televised speech, standing behind a podium emblazoned with the presidential seal. He spoke directly to the camera, his voice steady and reassuring. My fellow Americans and my fellow humans everywhere, we have faced unimaginable challenges today, and we have prevailed. Though the enemy struck swiftly and mercilessly, we fought back with courage and ingenuity. Our scientists, our soldiers, and our citizens came together to protect this planet we call home. But let me be clear, this is not the end. The threat remains, and we must remain vigilant. His words resonated with many, offering a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. Yet even as he spoke, new challenges arose. Refugees flooded out of devastated cities, seeking safety in rural areas. Supply chains collapsed, leaving shelves bare and fuel reserves depleted. Hospitals overflowed with the injured, and makeshift morgues sprang up in parking lots and warehouses. The human toll of the attack was staggering. Recovery would take years, if not decades. Despite the hardships, stories of resilience began to emerge. New York City, volunteers banded together to dig survivors out of rubble, using nothing more than their bare hands and borrowed tools. In Tokyo, engineers worked around the clock to restore power to critical facilities. In Sydney, teachers converted schools into temporary shelters, caring for children separated from their families. These acts of kindness, though small in the grand scheme of things, reminded people of what truly mattered: community, compassion, and the will to survive. Jack and Emma witnessed this spirit firsthand when they took a rare break from their duties. At NORAD. Stepping outside the secure facility, they were greeted by a scene both heartbreaking and inspiring. Lines of people stretched for blocks, waiting patiently for food and water distributed by aid workers. Makeshift memorials dotted the landscape, honoring those who hadn't made it. And yet amid the sorrow, there was determination as shared. Resolve to rebuild and move forward. "We can't give up," Emma said softly, watching a group of teenagers organize a cleanup effort. "If we do, then they've already won." Jack nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's make sure that doesn't happen." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert from inside the building. Rushing back to their stations, they discovered that Project Sentinel systems were behaving erratically. Energy readings fluctuated wildly, and several satellites showed signs of malfunction. Laura joined them moments later, her brow furrowed in concern. "This shouldn't be happening," she muttered, scanning the data. The system was designed to stabilize itself after activation. Something's interfering with it. Interfering? How? Jack asked, leaning over her shoulder. "I don't know yet," Laura admitted. "But whatever it is, it's coming from space." Emma's eyes widened. "You think the aliens are still out there?" "Maybe," Laura replied. "Or maybe we triggered something we don't fully understand." Document Part 3, 1,400 words. The hours passed slowly, each minute stretching longer than the last. Inside NORAD headquarters, Jack Thompson, Emma Lewis, and Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to decipher the strange fluctuations in Project Sentinel's systems. The energy readings were erratic, jumping between normal levels and alarming spikes without any clear pattern. It was as if the system itself had developed a mind of its own, reacting to something none of them could see or understand. Laura stared at her tablet, scrolling through lines of code and graphs that made little sense even to her trained eye. "This isn't random," she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension in the room. "Whatever's causing this is deliberate." Emma frowned, leaning closer to look at the data. "You think it's the aliens? It's like maybe they're trying to hack into our systems?" Laura replied, tapping her fingers against the desk. "But I don't think so. If the Zetharians wanted to disable Project Sentinel, they would have done it before we activated it. This feels different." Jack rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. He hadn't slept in over 24 hours, and the stress was starting to catch up with him. "Different how?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Just got hit by an alien invasion, destroyed their fleet. And now we're dealing with some kind of space ghosts messing with our tech. What else could go wrong?" Laura shot him a sharp glance. "Don't say that," she warned. "You'll jinx us." Emma let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded more like a sigh. "Too late for that, don't you think?" Despite the attempt at humor, no one smiled. The weight of the situation hung over them like a storm cloud, heavy and unrelenting. Knew they couldn't afford to ignore the problem, not when the fate of the planet might depend on understanding it. "What about the satellites?" Emma suggested after a moment. "Maybe one of them got damaged during the attack and is sending bad signals." Laura shook her head. "I checked. All the satellites are functioning within expected parameters. Whatever's interfering with the system isn't coming from Earth, it's external." "Then what do we do?" Jack asked, throwing up his hands. "Just sit here and wait for the next big surprise?" "No," Laura said firmly. We analyzed the interference. There has to be a clue somewhere in these readings. Something that can tell us where it's coming from more, who's behind it. With that, the three of them dove back into their work, poring over the data with renewed focus. Hours turned into days, as they sifted through endless streams of information, searching for anything unusual. Meanwhile, outside the secure walls of NORAD, the world continued to grapple with the aftermath of the attack. Reconstruction efforts were underway in cities devastated by the brief but devastating skirmish. Bulldozers cleared rubble from collapsed buildings while engineers worked to restore power and water supplies. Aid organizations distributed food and medical supplies to survivors, many of whom were still reeling from the shock of what had happened. In New York City, volunteers painted murals on the sides of ruined structures, turning scars of destruction into symbols of hope. One mural depicted Earth surrounded by beams of light, with the words "We stand together" written boldly across the bottom. Yet even as people came together to rebuild, fear lingered in the air like a shadow. Rumors spread faster than facts, fueled by fragmented reports of strange phenomena in the skies. In rural areas, farmers claimed to have seen glowing orbs hovering above their fields. Urban dwellers reported hearing low-frequency hums at night, vibrations that seemed to resonate deep in their bones. Scientists dismissed most of these accounts as hysteria, but others weren't so sure. Among those taking the report seriously was Dr. Samuel Grant, an astrophysicist based at a research facility in Colorado. For years, Samuel had studied anomalies in deep space, focusing on unexplained energy signatures and patterns that defied conventional physics. When news of the alien attack broke, he immediately suspected there was more to the story than met the eye. Now, armed with data collected during the activation of Project Sentinel, he believed he might be onto something. Samuel stood in front of a large screen displaying a series of charts and graphs, his brow furrowed in concentration. Beside him, his assistant, Rachel Monroe, adjusted the settings on a nearby computer, isolating specific frequencies from the raw data. The two of them had been working non-stop since the attack, driven by a shared sense of urgency. "Look at this," Samuel said suddenly, pointing to a spike in the graph. "This frequency matches the interference NORAD detected. But it's not coming from the Zetharian fleet, at least, not directly." Rachel squinted at the screen, her curiosity piqued. "Where is it coming from, then?" "That's the thing," Samuel replied, his tone grave. "It's originating from beyond our solar system. Way beyond. Whatever it is, it's moving toward us." Rachel's eyes widened. "You mean another fleet?" "Possibly," Samuel admitted. "But it's also possible we're dealing with something entirely new, something we've never encountered before." Back at NORAD, Laura received a call from Samuel's team, relaying their findings. She listened intently, her expression growing darker with each passing second. When the call ended, she turned to Jack and Emma, her face pale. "He's right," she said quietly. "The interference isn't coming from the Zetharians. It's coming from something else, something far away, but closing in fast." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "How fast?" "Too fast," Laura replied. "If Samuel's calculations are correct, it'll reach Earth in less than 72 hours. Emma sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "So, we didn't just piss off one alien species. We pissed off multiple ones. Or maybe they were already planning to come here," Jack muttered, rubbing his temples again. "Either way, we're screwed." Laura shook her head, refusing to give in to despair. "Not necessarily. If we can figure out what's causing the interference, we might be able to use it to our advantage. It's maybe even strengthen Project Sentinel. But we barely have time to breathe, let alone upgrade the system," Emma protested. "How are we supposed to pull that off in 3 days?" "We'll find a way," Laura insisted, her voice steady despite the odds. "We have to." As the clock ticked down, the pressure mounted. Teams around the world worked around the clock, pooling resources and sharing ideas in a desperate bid to bolster Earth's defenses. Engineers reinforced satellite networks, while programmers wrote new algorithms designed to counteract the mysterious interference. Scientists analyzed every scrap of data, looking for weaknesses in the approaching threat. In Washington, D.C., President Collins convened another emergency meeting, this time including representatives from allied nations. The mood in the room was tense, with leaders grappling with the reality of a second and, potentially greater attack looming on the horizon. General Hayes presented the latest intelligence, outlining the unknown entity's trajectory and estimated arrival time. "This changes everything," Collins said grimly, addressing the assembled officials. "We thought defeating the Zetherians was enough. Now we know it was only the beginning." One of the foreign delegates, a French ambassador named Claire Dubois, spoke up. "What are our options, Mr. President? Can Project Sentinel handle another attack?" Hayes hesitated before answering. "We believe so, ma'am, but only if we act quickly. Right now the system is unstable due to the interference. Our top priority is stabilizing it and ensuring it's ready to deploy when the time comes. And if it fails?" Dubois pressed, her voice tinged with skepticism. Hayes locked eyes with her, his expression grim. "Then we fight with whatever we have left." The meeting concluded with a unanimous decision to allocate all available resources to strengthening Earth's defenses. Governments issued public statements urging citizens to remain calm and cooperate with emergency response efforts. Behind the scenes, however, preparations for war ramped up dramatically. Military bases went on high alert, stockpiling weapons and munitions. Space agencies launched reconnaissance probes to gather more information about the approaching threat. Amid the chaos, ordinary people found ways to contribute. Factories converted production lines to manufacture medical supplies and protective gear. Schools organized donation drives, collecting food and clothing for displaced families. Social media campaigns encouraged acts of kindness, reminding everyone that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to unite in the face of adversity. For Jack, Emma, and Laura, the days blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and endless work. They barely left their stations, surviving on coffee and takeout meals delivered by sympathetic colleagues. Their progress was slow but steady, inching closer to a solution with each passing hour. By the third day, they had isolated the source of the interference and developed a plan to neutralize it. "It's risky," Laura warned, presenting their findings to General Hayes via video conference. "But if we don't try, Project Sentinel won't stand a chance against whatever's coming." Hayes nodded, his jaw tightening.
"Let's do it."
Whatever it takes. With the General's approval, the team implemented their plan, rerouting energy flows and recalibrating the system to compensate for the interference. The process was delicate, requiring precise timing and coordination. One wrong move could destabilize the entire network, leaving Earth vulnerable once again. Document Part 4, 1400 words. The hours passed like a slow-moving storm. Tick of the clock bringing Earth closer to the unknown. At NORA headquarters, the tension was palpable, a thick fog of anxiety hanging over everyone. Jack Thompson, Emma Lewis, and Laura Bennett sat in front of their monitors, watching as the countdown timer crept toward 0. Outside, the sky remained dark, heavy clouds blotting out the stars. It felt like the calm before a hurricane, deceptive quiet masking the chaos that was about to unfold. 12 hours, Jack muttered under his breath, leaning back in his chair. His voice was barely audible, but it carried the weight of everything they were facing. He glanced at the others, searching for some kind of reassurance, though he knew there wasn't any to be found. "You really think we're ready?" Laura didn't look up from her screen. Her fingers moved deftly across the keyboard, adjusting final parameters in Project Sentinel's system. "We've done everything we can," she said simply. "If this works, we'll have a fighting chance. If it doesn't..." She trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "What happens if the interference comes back? Or worse, what if whatever's coming isn't affected by our tech?" "That's why we recalibrated the system," Laura replied, her tone clipped but steady. "The new settings should allow us to adapt in real time. But let's not borrow trouble until we know what we're dealing with." Jack nodded, though doubt still gnawed at him. He wanted to believe they had a plan, that humanity wasn't walking blindly into another disaster. but the uncertainty was suffocating. Who or what was heading toward Earth? Was it another fleet of warships or something even more dangerous? The questions swirled in his mind, unanswered and relentless. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Matthew Collins paced anxiously in the Situation Room. Around him, advisors and military leaders monitored updates from NORAD and other defense facilities around the world. Maps displayed on large screens showed the trajectory of the approaching entity, its path marked by a red line cutting through the void of space. No one spoke, the silence broken only by the occasional beep of incoming data. General Carter Hayes stood near the president, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Sir," he began, his voice low but urgent, "we need to prepare for the possibility that this isn't just another alien fleet. Whatever it is, it's moving faster than anything we've ever seen. Faster than light, according to Dr. Grant's calculations." Collins stopped pacing, turning to face Hayes. "Faster than light," he repeated, his brow furrowing. "That's impossible." "Not necessarily," Hayes countered. "If these beings, or whatever they are, have technology advanced enough to bend the laws of physics, then nothing is impossible. And if they're capable of that, we're looking at an enemy far beyond anything we've encountered before." The president exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "So what do we tell people? That we might be facing gods?" Hayes hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "We don't tell them anything yet. Panic won't help anyone right now. All we can do is stay focused and trust that our teams are doing everything they can." Collins nodded reluctantly, though the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Less than 12 hours remained until the entity reached Earth. What would happen when it arrived? Would humanity survive another encounter? Or would this be the end? Back at NORAD, Laura finally pushed away from her desk, stretching her arms above her head. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but her expression was resolute. "That's it," she announced. "The system is fully recalibrated. Now all we can do is wait." Emma leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, and hope. Jack forced a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Hope's all we've got left." As the hours ticked by, reports of strange phenomena continued to pour in from around the globe. In remote areas of Alaska, witnesses claimed to have seen flashes of light streaking across the sky, moving too fast to track with the naked eye. In Australia, farmers reported hearing eerie whispers carried on the wind, voices speaking in languages no one could understand. Even astronauts aboard the International Space Station described unusual disturbances in Earth's magnetic field. Fluctuations that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the interference detected by Project Sentinel. Dr. Samuel Grant and his team worked tirelessly to analyze the data, piecing together clues about the approaching entity. They discovered that the energy signature matched nothing in their databases, not the Zithians, not any known celestial object, and certainly not anything human-made. Whatever it was, it existed outside the boundaries of conventional science. "It's alive," Rachel Monroe said suddenly, staring at the screen in front of her. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was saying. Samuel frowned, leaning closer to examine the data. "Alive? You mean like intelligent life?" "No," Rachel replied, shaking her head. "I mean literally alive. Look at these patterns. They're biological. It's not a ship or a machine. It's a living organism." Samuel's eyes widened as he processed her words. "Are you saying this thing is some kind of alien creature?" Rachel nodded slowly. "A massive one, and it's growing stronger as it approaches." The implications sent a chill through the room. If the entity wasn't a fleet of warships, but a single colossal being, then humanity's chances of survival dropped drastically. Weapons designed to disable technology would be useless against something organic. How do you fight a creature that spans light years? Samuel immediately contacted Nora, relaying the findings to Laura and her team. When she heard the news, her face went pale. "This changes everything," she whispered, clutching the edge of her desk. "If it's alive, then Project Sentinel might not work the way we expect it to." What do you mean? Emma asked, her voice rising in alarm. You said the system was ready. It is, Laura replied quickly, trying to reassure her. But we built it to counteract machines, not living things. If this entity has neural pathways or some kind of consciousness, the energy pulses could either destroy a Tor, make it angry. Dot groaned, burying his face in his hands. Great. So we're either going to kill it or piss it off. Either way, we're dead. We don't know that yet, Laura insisted, though her tone betrayed her own uncertainty. We'll adjust the frequency based on real-time feedback. If we can target specific parts of its biology, we might be able to neutralize it without causing harm. And if we can't, Emma pressed. Laura didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside, the world braced itself for the unknown. News outlets broadcast constant updates urging people to seek shelter and remain calm. Emergency services coordinated evacuation plans for major cities, while governments issued stark warnings about the potential danger. Social media buzzed with speculation, fear, and prayers. As billions of people prepared for the worst, in New York City volunteers gathered. In Central Park, setting up makeshift shelters for those unable to leave the area. Among them was a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, who had spent the past 3 days helping distribute food and supplies to survivors. Though exhausted, she refused to give up, driven by a fierce determination to protect her community. You should rest, one of the other volunteers said, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've been working non-stop. Sarah shook her head, smiling faintly. There's no time for rest. Not yet. Her words echoed the sentiment of countless others around the world. From Tokyo to London, from Sydney to Rio de Janeiro, ordinary people came together to face the unimaginable. They rebuilt homes, cared for the injured, and comforted the grieving, proving once again that humanity's greatest strength lay in its resilience. As dawn approached, the skies grew darker, the clouds thickening into an ominous blanket overhead. Lightning flickered in the distance, though no rain fell. The air felt charged, electric, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. At Norn, watched the countdown timer drop below 6 hours. Their nerves were frayed, their bodies aching from exhaustion, but none of them considered leaving their posts. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. Whether they were ready or not, suddenly the monitors lit up with activity. A blip appeared on the radar, moving rapidly toward Earth. It wasn't a fleet of ships or a swarm of drones. It was a single, massive object, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Its shape was indistinct, shifting and pulsating like a living thing. It's here, Laura whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the equipment. Emma gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. Now what? Jack swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. Now we fight. With trembling hands, Laura initiated the activation sequence for Project Sentinel. Energy surged through the satellites, converging on a single point high. Above the planet, system hummed to life, ready to unleash its full power. But as the seconds ticked by, something unexpected happened. The entity slowed its approach, hovering just beyond Earth's atmosphere. It didn't attack or retreat. It simply waited, as if studying the planet below. What's it doing? Emma asked, her voice tinged with both fear and curiosity. Don't know, Laura admitted, her eyes glued to the screen. But I don't like it. The world held its breath, waiting for the next move. Humanity had survived one bad. Document Part 5, 1,400 words. The voice lingered in the air, reverberating through every communication system on Earth. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but its presence was undeniable, filling the silence with an eerie calm. People stopped what they were doing, frozen in place as the words echoed in their minds. Humans, it had said.
Out.
You have shown courage. Do you wish to live? At NORAD headquarters, Jack Thompson, Emma Lewis, and Laura Bennett exchanged stunned glances. The question hung between them, unanswered and unanswerable. What did it mean? Was this a test? A negotiation? Or something far more complex? Laura broke the silence first, her voice trembling slightly. We need to respond. Emma shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. Respond how? We don't even know what we're dealing with. Jack leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk. It's asking if we want to live. I think that's pretty clear. We say yes, but what if saying yes has consequences? Emma countered. What if agreeing to whatever it wants means giving up something we can't afford? To lose? Laura frowned, her mind racing. We don't have time to debate this. If we don't answer, it might assume we're hostile or worse, that we've rejected its offer. Then we answer, Jack said firmly. We tell it we want to live. What other choice do we have? Laura nodded slowly, though uncertainty still clouded her expression. She turned back to her monitor, typing furiously as she prepared to transmit a response. Using a universal frequency, she crafted a simple message. Yes, we wish to live. The moment the message was sent, the entity reacted. Its glowing form pulsed brighter, shifting and expanding in ways that defied logic. On the monitor's energy, readings spiked erratically, forcing Laura to recalibrate the sensors just to keep up. Whatever this thing was, it was alive not just biologically, but intelligently. And then it spoke again. I see your desire, the voice said, softer this time, almost gentle. But survival comes at a cost. Are you prepared to pay it? Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding. This feels like a trap, might be, Laura admitted. But we don't have a choice. If we refuse, we risk annihilation. Quet clenched his fists, frustration boiling beneath the surface. So we're supposed to agree to some unknown price just to stay alive? That doesn't sound like much of a deal. No, Laura replied sharply. It sounds like the only deal we're getting. Let's focus on figuring out what it wants from us. Before they could decide on their next move, the entity began transmitting images directly into Earth's systems. They appeared on every screen, every device connected to the global network. The visuals were surreal scenes of distant planets, alien landscapes, and civilizations unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. There were towering structures made of light, oceans filled with crystalline creatures, and skies painted in colors that didn't exist on Earth, but interspersed. Among these wonders were images of destruction, cities reduced to rubble, ecosystems collapsing, and entire species wiped out. What is this? Emma whispered, staring at the screens in awe and horror. It's showing us its history, Laura murmured, her voice tinged with both wonder and dread. These are the worlds it's encountered before, and what happened to them? Jack frowned, leaning closer to get a better look. Is it trying to warn us or intimidate us? Maybe both, Laura replied. This thing has been traveling the galaxy for who knows how long. It's seen civilizations rise and fall, and now it's here to decide our fate. As the transmission continued, the images shifted to something new, symbols and patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. They formed a kind of language, one that Laura recognized immediately. It's communicating, she said, excitement creeping into her voice despite the gravity of the situation. These symbols, they're mathematical. It's using universal constants to convey information. Emma raised an eyebrow. Mathematics? Why math? Because math is the same everywhere, Laura explained. It's the one language that transcends biology and culture. Whoever or whatever this is, it's smart enough to know that. With renewed determination, Laura began decoding the symbols, translating them into human-readable text. The process was painstaking, requiring intense concentration and quick thinking. Jack and Emma watched anxiously as lines of code scrolled across the screen, each line bringing them closer to understanding the entity's message. Finally, after what felt like hours, Laura let out a sharp breath. I think I've got it. What does it say? Jack asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Laura hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It's offering us a choice. We can either submit to its will or prove ourselves worthy of coexistence. Emma blinked, processing the implications. Prove ourselves? How? That's where the cost comes in, Laura replied grimly. If we choose to fight for our survival, we'll have to pass a test. Something designed to measure our strength, intelligence, and resolve. Jack groaned, running a hand through his hair. Great. So we're not just fighting for our lives, we're taking an intergalactic exam. It's not funny, Emma snapped, though there was no real anger in her tone. What happens if we fail? Laura didn't answer right away. She finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't think we want to find out. The weight of the decision pressed down on all of them. Submitting to the entities will meant surrendering control of Earth's future, a prospect too bleak to consider. Accepting the challenge carried its own risks. What exactly would the test entail? Would humanity be judged as individuals or as a collective species? Most importantly, could they succeed? We have to take the test, Jack said finally, breaking the silence. His tone was resolute, leaving no room for argument. We can't roll over and give up. Not now, not ever. Emma hesitated, her fear warring with her pride. What if we're not ready? What if we make things worse? We won't, Jack insisted. We've already come this far. We destroyed the Zetharian stabilized Project Sentinel and survived everything they threw at us. If we can do that, we can handle whatever this thing throws at us too. Laura nodded slowly, agreeing with Jack's assessment. He's right. This isn't just about us, it's about everyone on Earth. If we back down now, we're condemning billions of people to whatever fate the entity has planned. Emma sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Okay, we take the test. With the decision made, Laura transmitted their response. We accept the challenge. The moment the message was sent, the entity reacted once again. Its glowing form contracted, shrinking until it resembled a single pulsating orb suspended high above the planet. Then, without warning, it unleashed a beam of light that streaked downward, striking a remote area in the Sahara Desert. What was that? Emma exclaimed, jumping to her feet. A landing site, Laura guessed, her eyes glued to the monitors. Setting up the test. Jack frowned, studying the data streaming in from satellites. Looks like it's creating some kind of arena. A massive structure, big enough to hold thousands of people. Or maybe just a few, Emma suggested, her voice tinged with unease. Do you think it's going to pick representatives? Laura nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Testing the entire population would be impractical. It'll likely select individuals based on certain criteria: intelligence, leadership, adaptability. Jack crossed his arms, his expression grim. So who's getting picked? Before anyone could answer, alarms blared throughout the facility. Alerts flashed on every screen, accompanied by urgent messages from military bases and government agencies around the world. Reports flooded in of strange occurrences, people collapsing suddenly, only to wake up moments later with no memory of what had happened. Others described feeling an invisible force pulling them toward the desert, as if drawn by an irresistible magnet. They're being summoned, Laura realized, her voice hushed with awe.
Ow.
The entity is choosing its candidates. Within minutes, lists of names began appearing on the monitors. Some were familiar scientists, soldiers, politicians, but many were ordinary citizens with no apparent connection to the crisis. Among them were Jack, Emma, and Laura. You've got to be kidding me, Jack muttered, staring at his name in disbelief. Why us? Because we're involved, Laura replied matter-of-factly. We activated Project Sentinel. We've been working non-stop since the attack. To the entity, we're key players. Emma rubbed her temples, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. This is insane. We're not prepared for this. We don't have a choice, Jack reminded her, his voice firm. If we run, we risk failing the test and losing everything. Reluctantly, Emma nodded. Fine. Let's go. Less than an hour later, the three of them boarded a military transport plane bound for the Sahara. Alongside them were dozens of others, each chosen for reasons unknown. The atmosphere aboard the aircraft was tense, a mix of fear, curiosity, and determination. No one spoke, the enormity of the task ahead weighing heavily on everyone's minds. When they arrived, the sight that greeted them was breathtaking. Rising from the sands was a colossal structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It resembled a giant sphere, its surface shimmering with iridescent hues that shifted with the light. Entrances dotted the perimeter, leading inside to what could only be described as an alien coliseum. "This is it," Laura whispered, her voice filled with quiet awe. "The test begins now." As they stepped inside, the air grew cooler and the walls seemed to